The wedding invitation trembled between my fingers, a crisp white envelope that felt more like a grenade ready to detonate. 17 years of silence, and now my son Marcus wanted to invite me, with conditions. Attendance was strictly prohibited, unless I agreed to keep quiet about the one secret that could unravel everything he believed about his perfect life. The morning light filtered through the small apartment's blinds, casting long shadows across the walls decorated with military commendations and faded photographs. My name is Rebecca Hartley, 47 years old, a former Army combat medic who had spent more time patching up soldiers in Afghanistan than understanding the complicated battlefield of family relationships. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. I'd been staring at the invitation since dawn, tracing the embossed letters with my finger. The same fingers that had once pulled wounded soldiers from burning Humvees, that had applied tourniquets under enemy fire, now seemed too fragile to handle this piece of paper. Marcus had been born during my second deployment. His father, Robert, had been a fellow soldier, a relationship that burned bright and fast, consumed by the intensity of war and then extinguished by its aftermath. We married young, both believing we could survive anything after what we'd seen. Downrange. But trauma has its own language, and we were speaking different dialects. After Robert died in a convoy explosion, I returned home a different woman. The military had been my family, my structure, my entire world. Civilian life felt like walking through a minefield where every step could trigger an unexpected explosion of emotions. Marcus was raised by my parents while I cycled through various VA rehabilitation programs, battling PTSD and trying to rebuild myself. My military pension and disability benefits provided just enough to maintain a modest existence. The walls of my apartment were a testament to a life of service. Shadow boxes displaying medals, a folded flag from Robert's funeral, photographs that captured moments of camaraderie that civilians could never truly understand. When Marcus turned 18, the distance between us had already become a canyon. He resented my absence during his childhood, the sporadic visits, the therapy sessions that seemed to consume more of my energy than our relationship. I tried. God knows I tried to be present. But how do you explain to a child that some wounds aren't visible, that some battles continue long after the war ends? My work as a veterans support counselor became my lifeline. Helping other veterans navigate the treacherous terrain of post-military life gave me a sense of purpose. Each story I heard, each soldier I supported, was another piece of my own healing journey. But Marcus saw it differently. To him, I was always working, always helping others, but never fully present for him. The phone calls became shorter, the visits more infrequent. By the time he graduated college and started his career in finance, we were little more than strangers who shared genetic code. He built a life of precision and control, everything I had lost during years of military service. Now this invitation, carefully worded, almost clinical in its approach. He wanted me there, but only if I agreed to a set of unspoken rules. No discussions about the past, no mention of my military service. No revelations that might disrupt the carefully constructed narrative of his life. I picked up the phone, my prosthetic hand, a reminder of my last deployment, feeling heavy against the receiver. The VA hospital had fitted me with a state-of-the-art replacement after an IED incident that nearly cost me my entire arm. Each piece of metal and synthetic material was a testament to survival, to adaptation. The wedding was set for 3 months from now in a vineyard outside Napa. Marcus's fiancée, Elizabeth, came from Old Money. I'd met her twice, polite encounters, filled with awkward small talk and measured distances. She was everything I was not, perfectly groomed, with a life mapped out in spreadsheets and social expectations. My fingers traced the edge of a photograph of Robert and me, taken just before his last deployment. We were young, hopeful, believing we could conquer anything. The military had been our shared language, our bond. But languages can be forgotten, connections can be severed. As a combat medic, I had learned that survival sometimes meant making impossible choices. Saving one life might mean accepting the loss of another. I wondered if this wedding invitation was another such choice, a negotiations for a temporary peace, a truce built on unspoken agreements and carefully maintained silences. The secret I carried was not just mine. It belonged to Marcus, to Elizabeth, to the entire elaborate world they had constructed. And I was about to decide whether that world would remain intact or crumble under the weight of a truth long buried. The Veterans Support Group met every Tuesday at the community center, a converted warehouse that smelled of stale coffee and unspoken memories. I'd been facilitating these meetings for 5 years, watching broken soldiers piece themselves back together, one story at a time. Today felt different. The tension in the room was thicker than usual, laden with unspoken histories and half-finished healing. Sarah, a young veteran who had served in military intelligence, arrived late. Her hands shook as she stirred her coffee, the tremors a testament to battles fought both overseas and within herself. "I got the wedding invitation," she said, breaking the room's contemplative silence. "My brother doesn't want me there unless I promise to be normal." The word hung in the air. Normal. As if our experiences could be neatly folded and tucked away like a dress uniform after a formal ceremony. My colleague, Dr. Martinez, a retired Army psychologist, caught my eye. We'd worked together long enough to communicate without words. The weight of Marcus's invitation pressed against my chest, a constant reminder of the chasm between military and civilian life. That evening, I pulled out the box of documents I'd carefully maintained over the years. Military records, medical reports, personal correspondence. Each piece a fragment of a story more complicated than Marcus could ever understand. A photograph slipped out, yellowed at the edges. Robert, standing beside a burned-out military vehicle, his smile a defiance against the destruction surrounding him. The VA had been both my sanctuary and my prison. Years of therapy, support groups, and rehabilitation had taught me to manage my PTSD, but some memories refused to be contained. Marcus had never understood the depth of those experiences, the way trauma becomes a part of you, like a phantom limb that aches long after the original has been lost. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, clinical and measured. "Dinner, next week. Discuss wedding details." No warmth, no invitation to reconnect. Just a transaction, another item to be checked off a list. I remembered the day he had stopped calling me Mom. It wasn't a sudden change, but a gradual erosion. After my last deployment, when the nightmares were at their worst, when the medication seemed to blur the lines between reality and memory, he had stepped back. Each hospital visit, each therapy session became another brick in the wall between us. The support group had become my real family. Veterans who understood that healing wasn't linear, that some wounds never completely close. We shared a language of survival that civilian world could never translate. Sarah spoke about her brother's wedding, about the expectation of being presentable, of hiding the parts of ourselves that didn't fit into neat social narratives. Dr. Martinez approached me after the meeting. "The invitation is more than just a piece of paper," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's a negotiation, a chance to rebuild or to finally accept the destruction." That night, I pulled out the old military trunk stored in my closet. Inside, carefully preserved, were letters. Robert had written, medical reports from my last deployment, commendation medals that told only a fraction of the story. Each document was a piece of evidence, a testament to a life lived on the razor's edge between survival and destruction. The prosthetic arm felt heavy, a constant reminder of the cost of service. I'd learned to use it with the same precision I had used my original hand in emergency medical situations. Adaptation was survival, something Marcus had never truly understood. My work at the Veterans Support Center was more than just a job. It was a mission, a way to transform the pain of my experiences into something meaningful. Each veteran I helped was a small victory against the system that had broken so many of us. The photograph of Robert and me from our wedding day caught the light. We were so young, so full of hope. The military had been our shared dream, our collective identity. But dreams, like bodies, can be broken beyond repair. Marcus's text echoed in my mind. A clinical invitation to discuss wedding details. No mention of reconnection, of healing. Just another transaction in a long history of disconnected interactions. Pulled out the wedding invitation again, studying the carefully chosen words. The conditions were clear. My presence was allowed, but my truth was not. A negotiation written in the language of silence, of suppression. Something was brewing. A confrontation long postponed. The secret I carried was not just a piece of information, but a grenade that could obliterate the carefully constructed world Marcus had built. And I was about to decide whether to let it detonate. The restaurant was one of those sterile, overpriced establishments that Marcus frequented, all glass and minimalist design, where the price of a meal could cover a week's groceries for most veterans I knew. He chose the location, as always, a subtle reminder of the distance between our worlds. "Mom," he said, his voice clipped and professional, "we need to discuss the wedding expectations." Elizabeth sat beside him, her engagement ring catching the light, a diamond that probably cost more than my annual disability check. Her smile was practiced, her posture rigid, a performance of social perfection. I remembered when Marcus was a child, how he would curl up next to me after I'd returned from deployment, how his small hands would trace the scars on my arms, asking countless questions about the world beyond our little apartment. Those moments seemed like fragments of another life now. "I want to be clear," Marcus continued, unfolding a napkin with surgical precision. "There are certain topics that are off-limits at the wedding. Your military service, the circumstances of my childhood, any personal history that might make Elizabeth's family uncomfortable." The waiter approached, his movements careful around our table. I caught the quick glance he gave my prosthetic arm, a look I'd grown accustomed to over the years. People either stared or pretended not to see, a dance of social discomfort I'd mastered long ago. Elizabeth leaned forward, her voice soft but sharp. "Marcus mentioned you've been working with veteran support groups. That must be challenging." The word hung in the air like a judgment, more a dismissal than a genuine inquiry. My mind drifted to the veterans I'd counseled. Sarah, who struggled with PTSD after her intelligence deployment. Michael, who lost both legs in an IED explosion. The stories of survival that Marcus seemed desperate to erase, to sanitize. "We're concerned," Marcus continued, "about potential incidents at the wedding. You understand?" The word incidents was a carefully chosen weapon, implying my potential for disruption, my inability to conform to social expectations. I thought about the countless family gatherings I'd missed. The birthdays, the graduations, the moments stolen by my military service and subsequent struggles. Each absence was a wound Marcus had carried, a resentment that had grown like a slow-spreading infection. The restaurant's ambient music, some forgettable jazz rendition, played softly. I remembered the sounds of war, helicopter rotors, distant explosions, the urgent breaths of soldiers I'd tried to save. Those sounds made this carefully curated silence feel suffocating. "Your therapist," Elizabeth said, her fingers tracing the stem of her water glass. "She's prepared a letter confirming your stability?" The word stability was a thinly veiled code for predictability, for my ability to suppress the parts of myself that made them uncomfortable. Marcus pulled out a folder. Everything with him was always meticulously organized. Medical reports, therapy documentation, A comprehensive file that reduced my entire existence to a set of clinical observations. "We've spoken with Dr. Reynolds," he said. "She believes you're managing your conditions effectively." The word conditions felt like a diagnosis, a reduction of my entire life experience to a medical problem to be controlled. I thought about the support group, about Sarah's struggle to be seen beyond her military service, about Michael's fight to be recognized as more than his physical injuries. Our experiences were not conditions to be managed, but lives to be understood. The waiter returned, refilling water glasses with practiced efficiency. I caught my reflection in the restaurant's glass wall, a woman reduced to a series of expectations, of potential disruptions. Marcus continued his clinical breakdown of wedding expectations. No discussions about my military service, no mention of Robert, my late husband. No references to the years of struggle, of rehabilitation, of survival. Elizabeth watched me, her expression a mixture of pity and mild contempt. I recognized that look. It was the same look I'd seen from countless civilians who couldn't comprehend the world of military service, who saw our experiences as something to be sanitized, to be made palatable. My prosthetic arm felt heavy, a physical reminder of sacrifices Marcus seemed desperate to erase. Each metal joint, each synthetic muscle was a testament to survival, to adaptation, concepts that seemed foreign in this carefully curated restaurant. "Are we clear?" Marcus asked, his voice cutting through my thoughts. It wasn't a question, but a demand. A final line drawn in the sand, separating my world from his meticulously constructed reality. I looked at my son, at Elizabeth, at the carefully orchestrated environment designed to minimize my existence. And in that moment, I realized the secret I carried was more than just information. It was a weapon, and I was about to decide how to use it. The Veterans Affairs Office was a labyrinth of bureaucracy, walls lined with faded photographs of soldiers from different eras. I'd spent countless hours here over the years, navigating a system designed to both support and frustrate those who had served. Today was different. Today, I was collecting more than just medical records. My fingers traced the edges of the file folders I'd carefully assembled. Years of documentation, medical reports, personal correspondence, each document a piece of a puzzle Marcus believed was better left unsolved. The clerk, a retired Air Force sergeant named Thompson, watched me with understanding in his eyes. "These are copies of everything," I said, spreading the documents across his desk. "Medical evaluations from my last deployment, psychological assessments, commendation records that told only a fraction of my story." Thompson nodded, recognizing the weight of what I was doing. The waiting room was filled with veterans, some young, some old, all carrying invisible wounds. A young woman with a prosthetic leg scrolled through her phone. An older man with a Vietnam-era cap stared into the middle distance. We were a community defined by experiences Marcus could never understand. My mind drifted to the support group, meetings, Sarah's struggle with her family's expectations, Michael's fight to be seen beyond his physical injuries, the countless stories of veterans forced to minimize their experiences to fit into a world that never truly understood their sacrifices. The secret I carried wasn't just information. It was a lifeline, a truth that could unravel everything Marcus believed about his family, about himself. I thought about Robert, about the circumstances of Marcus's birth, about the years of silence and separation. Thompson handed me a sealed envelope. "Everything you requested," he said quietly. "Are you sure about this?" The question hung in the air, loaded with years of unspoken understanding. I remembered the day Marcus had stopped seeing me as a mother. It wasn't a sudden break, but a gradual erosion. Each missed birthday, each therapy session, each hospitalization had been another brick in the wall between us. He had constructed a narrative of abandonment, of a mother who chose service over motherhood, but narratives can be rewritten. The VA Support Center had become my real family. Veterans who understood that healing wasn't linear, that some wounds never completely close. We shared a language of survival that the civilian world could never translate. At home, I began organizing the documents. Medical records from my last deployment. Psychological evaluations. Commendation medals that told only a surface-level story. Each piece of paper was evidence, a testament to a life lived on the razor's edge between survival and destruction. The prosthetic arm felt different. Now, no longer a reminder of loss, but a symbol of resilience. I'd learned to use it with the same precision I had used my original hand in emergency medical situations. Adaptation was survival, something Marcus had never truly understood. I pulled out the old military trunk stored in my closet. Inside were letters Robert had written, personal documents that told a more complicated story than Marcus knew, photographs of moments between deployments, handwritten notes, official records that revealed truths long buried. My work counseling veterans had taught me that silence was a form of violence. We spent years protecting others from our truths, believing we were helping, but truth has a way of demanding to be heard. The wedding invitation sat on my desk, a crisp reminder of the negotiation to come. Attendance allowed, but only under strict conditions. No discussions about the past, no revelations that might disrupt the carefully constructed narrative of Marcus's life. I thought about the day Marcus was born, about Robert, about the circumstances that shaped our family's complex history. The secret I carried was more than just information. It was a lifeline, a truth that could either destroy or liberate. The support group had become my sanctuary. Dr. Martinez, my colleague, had often spoken about the importance of truth. Some secrets, she would say, are like wounds that never heal when left untreated. I began creating a timeline, carefully documenting every detail, every piece of evidence, not out of anger, but out of a need for clarity, for understanding, for reclaiming a narrative that had been taken from me. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Another clinical communication, another attempt to control the narrative. But narratives can be rewritten. Boundaries can be redrawn. The secret I carried was a grenade, and I was about to decide whether to let it detonate or defuse the tension that had defined our relationship for years. Something was brewing, a confrontation long postponed, and I was no longer the passive participant Marcus believed me to be. The storage unit was a time capsule of memories, tucked away in a nondescript complex on the outskirts of town. Rows of identical metal doors, each protecting its own collection of forgotten histories. My unit, number 237, had been a silent keeper of my past for years. I arrived early, before the morning fog had fully lifted. The key felt heavy in my hand, a key to more than just a metal door, but to a narrative Marcus had never been allowed to understand. Rows of carefully labeled boxes waited inside, each one a chapter of a story waiting to be told. The first box contained Robert's military records, detailed evaluations, deployment reports, personal correspondence that painted a complex picture of a soldier's life. I'd spent years protecting Marcus from these truths, believing silence was a form of protection. Now I understood silence was its own kind of violence. Photographs spilled out as I opened the next box. Robert in full uniform. Us, together before. Deployments. Candid moments captured between missions. Each image was a fragment of a story more nuanced than Marcus could imagine. I began methodically scanning and digitizing each document, creating a comprehensive archive. My work at the Veterans Support Center had taught me the importance of documentation. Every veteran's story was a delicate tapestry of experiences, of trauma, of resilience. I approached my own history with the same meticulous care I'd used when counseling other veterans through their healing journeys. The financial records required the most careful examination. Bank statements, property, documents, insurance policies. Each piece of paper told a story of sacrifice and survival. I'd paid for Marcus's education, supported his early career, all while maintaining a careful distance he interpreted as abandonment. My prosthetic hand moved with practiced precision, sorting through decades of accumulated evidence. Each movement was a testament to adaptation, to survival. The metal and synthetic materials were more than just a replacement. They were a symbol of resilience, of the ability to rebuild after destruction. Dr. Martinez's words echoed in my mind. "Truth is not a weapon," she'd say during our support group sessions. "It's a path to understanding." I was beginning to understand the difference. The medical records were the most challenging to review. Psychological evaluations from my time in service. Treatment records for PTSD. Detailed accounts of the challenges I'd faced both during and after my military service. Each page was a reminder of the battles fought both overseas and within myself. I discovered a folder I'd forgotten existed. Personal. Letters from Robert, written during his last deployment. Letters never sent, thoughts never shared. They revealed a depth to our relationship that Marcus had never understood, the complexity of love forged in the crucible of military service. My phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus. Another clinical communication attempting to control the narrative of my attendance at his wedding. I ignored it, continuing my careful documentation. The support group had become my lifeline, my true family. Veterans who understood that healing wasn't linear, that some wounds never completely close. Sarah, Michael, the countless others who had shared their stories. They had taught me the power of speaking truth. By noon, I had created a comprehensive digital archive. Medical records, financial documents, personal correspondence, a complete picture of a life Marcus had only seen in fragments. Each scanned document was carefully labeled, backed up on multiple drives. I thought about the conversation in the Yon's restaurant. Marcus's attempt to sanitize my existence, to reduce my life to a series of controlled interactions. Elizabeth's careful scrutiny. The implicit message that my military service was something to be hidden, minimized. The VA support center had a wall of photographs, veterans from different conflicts, different eras. Each image told a story of sacrifice, of survival. I had become another thread in that tapestry, another voice refusing to be silenced. My research extended beyond personal documents. I began collecting additional evidence, testimonials from fellow soldiers, commendation records, detailed accounts of my service. Each piece was carefully verified, meticulously documented. The secret I carried was more than just information. It was a complex narrative of love, sacrifice, survival. A story Marcus had never been allowed to understand. I was no longer interested in protecting him from the truth. I was committed to revealing it. I thought about the wedding invitation, the carefully worded conditions. No discussions about my military service, no mention of my past, as if my entire existence could be reduced to a set of acceptable behaviors. By late afternoon, the digital archive was complete. Thousands of documents, carefully organized, cross-referenced. A lifetime of experiences transformed into a comprehensive narrative, not as a weapon, but as a truth waiting to be understood. The prosthetic arm felt different now, no longer a reminder of loss, but a symbol of adaptation, of survival, of the ability to rebuild after destruction. Each mechanical joint was a testament to resilience, to the human capacity for transformation. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the storage unit, I realized I was no longer preparing for a confrontation. I was preparing for a revelation. Marcus believed he could control the narrative of our family's history. But narratives, like lives, are far more complex than anyone can predict, and I was about to ensure he understood that complexity. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and I was ready. The Santa Clara Veterans Leadership Conference was not just another event. It was a gathering of warriors, survivors, and storytellers. As I walked through the conference hall, my prosthetic arm caught the light, a gleaming testament to survival that drew knowing glances from fellow veterans. Diana Rodriguez, the conference organizer, approached me with a folder marked Special Presentation. We'd worked together for years, creating support programs that bridged the gap between military service and civilian life. This year's conference was different, more urgent, more personal. "We want you to speak," Diana said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of veteran advocacy, not just about your medical experiences, but about family, about survival, about the invisible battles veterans fight long after leaving the service. The conference hall buzzed with energy. Veterans, from different generations, some in full uniform, others in civilian clothes that couldn't quite hide their military bearing. Young soldiers fresh from deployment, retired officers, families of those who had served. Each person carried a story, a fragment of a larger narrative. I thought about Marcus, about the wedding invitation that felt more like a legal document than a family gathering, about the carefully constructed barriers he'd built to keep me at a distance. This opportunity was more than just a speaking engagement. It was a platform. The presentation materials Diana handed me were comprehensive. Research on veteran family dynamics, psychological studies about intergenerational trauma, personal narratives that mirrored my own experience. Each document was a piece of a larger puzzle I was preparing to solve. My work at the Veterans Support Center had prepared me for this moment. Years of counseling, of listening, of helping veterans reclaim their narratives. Sarah's struggle with her family's expectations, Michael's fight to be recognized beyond his physical injuries. Each story had been a lesson in resilience. The conference provided access to resources I hadn't fully explored before. Legal consultations for veterans, family mediation specialists, psychological support networks. Each connection was a potential tool in the larger strategy I was developing. During a break, I met with Dr. Elena Ramirez, a renowned psychologist specializing in veteran family dynamics. Her research had been groundbreaking, exploring the complex ways military service impacts familial relationships across generations. "The wounds of service," Dr. Ramirez explained, reviewing some of my documentation, "they're not just physical, they're emotional, psychological. They reverberate through families like sound waves, affecting generations." My conversation with her revealed layers of complexity I hadn't fully understood. The way trauma is inherited. How children of veterans often develop complex survival mechanisms. Marcus's clinical approach to our relationship suddenly made more sense. A protective strategy learned from years of uncertainty. The Veterans Support Network was more than just a professional community. It was a family, a collective of individuals who understood that survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant finding meaning, creating connection. I spent hours in breakout sessions, collecting resources, documenting strategies, legal information about veteran rights, psychological support networks, family mediation techniques. Each piece of information was carefully cataloged, another tool in the arsenal I was building. Diana introduced me to a documentary filmmaker working on a project about veteran family dynamics. "Your story," she said, "could change how people understand military service and family relationships." The opportunity was becoming clearer. This wasn't just about attending Marcus's wedding. This was about reclaiming a narrative that had been controlled, minimized, misunderstood for years. During a panel discussion on veteran mental health, I listened to stories that echoed my own. Veterans who had been marginalized, family members who didn't understand the depth of military experiences. Each story was a thread in a larger tapestry of survival. My prosthetic arm, once a source of discomfort, now felt like a symbol of strength. Each mechanical joint represented adaptation, resilience. The technology that had allowed me to continue serving, to continue living, to continue fighting. The conference provided more than just information. It provided validation. A collective understanding that my experiences were not a burden to be hidden, but a story to be told. As the day progressed, I connected with legal advisors specializing in veteran family law. They reviewed the documentation I'd gathered, offering insights into potential strategies for addressing the complex dynamics with Marcus. Dr. Ramirez's final words resonated deeply. "Your story is not just about you," she said. "It's about breaking cycles of misunderstanding, of creating genuine connection." The wedding was approaching, but this conference had transformed my preparation from a personal mission to a broader statement about veteran experiences, about family, about survival. Marcus believed he could control the narrative of our family's history. But narratives are living things. They breathe. They grow. They demand to be understood, and I was no longer interested in being a passive character in someone else's story. As the conference concluded, Diana handed me a final folder. "This," she said, "might be the most important document you'll receive." I knew, without opening it, that everything was about to change. The rehearsal dinner was a meticulously choreographed affair. Every detail as precisely arranged as a military formation. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, wine glasses gleamed under soft lighting, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife or a field surgeon's scalpel. I arrived precisely at 7 p.m., my prosthetic arm hidden beneath a tailored navy blazer, my posture straight as a military guidon. The venue was a restored vineyard estate, the kind of place that screamed old money and carefully maintained appearances. Marcus had chosen it deliberately, a statement of the life he'd constructed, far removed from the world of military service. Elizabeth's family occupied one side of the expansive dining room, a tableau of generational wealth, businessmen in custom suits, women with jewelry that likely cost more than my annual disability check. They looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed discomfort. The veteran mother, the outlier in their perfectly curated world, Marcus, approached, his movements precise, calculated. "Mom," he said, the word falling flat between us. "I hope you understand the importance of discretion tonight." His eyes darted nervously, scanning the room as if expecting me to detonate some metaphorical bomb. The guest list was a who's who of Marcus's professional and social world. Investment bankers, tech entrepreneurs, the kind of people who viewed military service as a distant abstraction. I recognized the looks, respect tinged with uncomfortable distance. They saw my prosthetic arm, the way I carried myself, and immediately categorized me. Elizabeth glided over, her wedding dress for the rehearsal, a designer piece that probably cost more than my first year's military salary. "Rebecca," she said, the use of my first name a calculated attempt at intimacy. "We're so glad you could make it." The lie hung in the air between us. I thought about the documents I'd carefully assembled. Medical records, financial statements, personal correspondence that told a story far more complex than anyone in this room could comprehend. The secret I carried was not just information. It was a lifeline, a truth that could unravel everything Marcus believed about his family. The dinner progressed with military-like precision. Each course arrived at exactly the right moment. Conversations flowed like carefully rehearsed scripts. I watched Marcus interact with his future in-laws, performing a version of himself that felt entirely manufactured. During the main course, Elizabeth's father, a retired investment banker with the kind of carefully maintained appearance that screamed old money, attempted small talk. "So, Rebecca, Marcus mentioned you work with veterans now?" The question was a probe, an attempt to categorize, to minimize. "I counsel veterans," I responded, my voice calm, "helping them navigate the complex transition from military to civilian life." Each word was chosen carefully, a strategic response designed to reveal nothing and everything. Marcus tensed. I could see it in the way his hand gripped his wine glass, in the subtle shift of his posture. He was a man terrified of unpredictability, of anything that might disrupt the narrative he'd so carefully constructed. The Veterans Support Group had prepared me for moments like these. Years of helping soldiers reclaim their stories, of understanding the delicate dance between truth and survival. Sarah's struggles with her family's expectations. Michael's fight to be recognized beyond his physical injuries. Each experience had been a lesson in strategic communication. As dessert was served, an elaborate construction of molecular gastronomy that looked more like art than food, I noticed Marcus watching me. Not with love, not with hatred, but with a clinical detachment that spoke volumes about our relationship. Elizabeth's younger sister, a recent law school graduate, attempted to bridge the conversational divide. "So you were a combat medic? That must have been fascinating." The word fascinating hung in the air like a clinical observation, reducing years of complex service to a dinner party curiosity. I thought about Robert, about the circumstances of Marcus's birth, about the years of silence and separation. The secret I carried was more than just information. It was a lifeline that could either destroy or liberate. As the evening progressed, I watched the intricate social dance. Marcus performing the role of successful son, Elizabeth maintaining a carefully cultivated image, her family evaluating every interaction with the precision of market analysts. During a moment between courses, I caught Marcus alone near the wine display. "We need to talk," I said quietly, my voice carrying the same calm I'd used in combat medical situations. "About more than just wedding etiquette." His response was immediate, defensive. "Mom, not here. Not now." The words were a plea, a command, a desperate attempt to maintain control. But control was a concept I'd long since redefined. The dinner continued, a perfect performance of social expectations. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. The carefully maintained facade was beginning to crack. I thought about the documents I'd gathered, the medical records, the personal correspondence, the comprehensive narrative that told a story far more complex than anyone in this room could comprehend. As the evening drew to a close, Elizabeth's father raised a toast. To new beginnings, to family, to the future. I smiled. Beginnings, indeed. The secret I carried was a grenade, and I was about to decide exactly how to make it detonate. The morning after the rehearsal dinner arrived with a tension that felt like a live wire stretched between us. Marcus called early, his voice a razor-edged attempt at control. "We need to discuss your behavior last night," he said, as if I were a child who needed correcting rather than a veteran who had survived wars he could never comprehend. I'd spent the early hours reviewing the documents I'd carefully assembled. Medical records, financial statements, personal correspondence that told a story far more complicated than Marcus's carefully curated narrative could contain. Each page was a testament to a life of sacrifice, of survival, of complex love that defied simple categorization. The Veterans Support Center had taught me about strategic communication. How to speak truth without becoming a weapon. How to reveal without destroying. Dr. Martinez's words echoed in my mind. "Your story is not about revenge. It's about understanding." Marcus arrived at my apartment, Elizabeth in tow, a united front, designed to intimidate. The living room was a carefully preserved space that told the story of my life. Photographs of fellow soldiers, commendation medals, a folded flag from Robert's funeral. each item a chapter they had never bothered to read. "Mom," Marcus began, his voice clinical, professional. "Your behavior at the rehearsal dinner was inappropriate." Elizabeth sat beside him, her posture a perfect illustration of controlled disapproval. The implication was clear. I was a problem. To be managed, a loose thread in the carefully woven fabric of their lives. I thought about the years of silence, the missed birthdays, the holidays spent alone while Marcus constructed a life that seemed designed to erase any trace of his military. Family history, my prosthetic arm, a constant reminder of sacrifice, felt heavy with unspoken stories. "Inappropriate," I repeated, the word a stone dropped into the stillness of the room. "Interesting choice of words." Elizabeth leaned forward, her engagement ring catching the light, a symbol of the life Marcus had built, carefully constructed, meticulously controlled. "We're concerned," she said, "about potential disruptions to the wedding. Your history of emotional instability." The phrase emotional instability was a calculated weapon, a clinical dismissal of a lifetime of service, of survival, of complexity that they could never understand. My military records told a different story. Commendations for bravery, precise medical evaluations, psychological assessments that documented not instability, but extraordinary resilience. Each document was a shield against their attempts to minimize my existence. Marcus pulled out a folder of course he had a folder. Everything with him was about control, about reducing life to manageable categories. "We've spoken with your therapist," he said. "We want to ensure everything remains appropriate." The word appropriate hung in the air like a threat. I thought about the veterans I'd counseled. Sarah's fight against family expectations. Michael's struggle to be seen beyond his physical injuries. Each story a reminder that family is not about control, but about understanding. "Appropriate," I said quietly, "is an interesting word coming from someone who knows so little about my life." Elizabeth's hand found Marcus's, a united front designed to intimidate. But I had faced down enemies far more terrifying than a pair of social climbers attempting to sanitize my existence. The documents I'd gathered were more than just paper. They were a comprehensive narrative, medical records detailing my service, financial statements showing years of support, personal correspondence that revealed a depth of love and sacrifice Marcus had never comprehended. "We're concerned," Marcus continued, "about what you might say, about the potential for embarrassment." The word embarrassment was a clear threat, a warning, an attempt to control a narrative that had long since escaped their limited understanding. My prosthetic arm felt like a medal of honor, each mechanical joint a testament to adaptation, to survival, to the ability to rebuild after destruction. "Embarrassment," I repeated, "is an interesting concept, especially from someone who knows so little about true sacrifice." Elizabeth's composure cracked slightly, a micro-expression of uncertainty. Marcus's hand tightened around hers, a tells of the fragility beneath their carefully maintained exterior. The Veterans Support Network had prepared me for moments like these. Strategic communication, understanding the difference between revelation and destruction. Each conversation a delicate negotiation of truth. "We want assurances," Marcus said, pulling out a document. A legal-looking paper that felt more like a contract than a family discussion. "Assurances about your behavior, about what you might say." I thought about the comprehensive archive I'd assembled. Medical records, financial statements, personal correspondence, a narrative they could not control, could not minimize. The secret I carried was more than just information. It was a lifeline, a truth that demanded to be understood. "Assurances," I said quietly, "are not something you can demand. They're something you earn." Marcus's facade began to crack. Elizabeth's perfectly maintained composure showed the first signs of strain. They had come expecting compliance, expecting me to be the manageable, minimized version of myself they had always imagined. But I was no longer that person. The wedding was approaching. The secret was ready to be revealed, and I was no longer interested in being a passive character in someone else's story. Resistance, I had learned in my years of service, was not about destruction. It was about reclaiming narrative, about speaking truth. And I was about to speak. The wedding venue was an architectural marvel of glass and steel, perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Hundreds of thousands of dollars transformed into a single day of carefully choreographed perfection. I arrived 2 hours before the ceremony, my prosthetic arm concealed beneath a tailored navy blazer, a folder tucked discreetly under my arm. The wedding planner, a woman with a headset and a clipboard that seemed an extension of her body, looked at me with barely concealed tension. "Ms. Hartley," she said, her voice a razor's edge of professional courtesy, "we need to discuss your positioning during the ceremony." I thought about the documents I'd carefully assembled: medical records, financial statements, personal correspondence that told a story far more complex than anyone in this room could comprehend. Each page was a weapon more precise than any I'd be wielded during my military service. The preparation room buzzed with nervous energy. Bridesmaids adjusted makeup. Elizabeth's mother fussed with last-minute details. Marcus stood by the window, his reflection a study in controlled anxiety. He caught my eye, a look that was part warning, part plea. Dr. Martinez's words from the Veterans Support Group echoed in my mind. "Truth is not about destruction," she'd say. "It's about understanding, about breaking cycles of silence." I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, not with anger, not with revenge, but with a carefully constructed narrative that would reveal the truth in all its complexity. The wedding coordinator approached again. "Mr. Walker requests that you remain seated, quietly, during the ceremony." The instruction was less a request, and more a thinly veiled command. My mind drifted to the veterans I'd counseled. Sarah's fight against family expectations. Michael's struggle to be recognized beyond his physical injuries. Each story a reminder that family is not about control, but about understanding. The folder felt heavy, not with paper, but with years of unspoken truth. Decades of sacrifice. A narrative that Marcus had never been allowed to understand. Elizabeth's family occupied the front rows, a collection of business elites and social climbers who viewed military service as a distant abstraction. They looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed discomfort. The veteran mother, the outlier. Marcus had spent years constructing a life designed to erase any trace of his military family history. Each decision, each relationship, a carefully maintained facade. But facades, I had learned in combat and in life, are always fragile. The wedding march began, soft music filling the glass-enclosed space. Elizabeth appeared, a vision in white, the embodiment of everything Marcus had been chasing: perfection, control, social acceptance. I watched Marcus, saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand gripped Elizabeth's during the ceremony. A man terrified of unpredictability, of anything that might disrupt the narrative he'd so carefully constructed. As the officiant began the traditional wedding vows, I opened the folder. The first document was a medical record, detailed, precise, revealing a truth about Marcus's birth that would shatter everything he believed about his family's history. My prosthetic arm felt like a medal of honor, each mechanical joint a testament to adaptation, to survival, to the ability to rebuild after destruction. The ceremony continued, vows exchanged, rings presented, a perfect performance of social expectations. But beneath the surface, something was about to change fundamentally. I thought about Robert, about the circumstances of Marcus's birth, about the years of silence and separation. The secret I carried was more than just information. It was a lifeline that could either destroy or liberate. As the officiant reached the final moments of the ceremony, I stood. The room fell silent. Marcus turned, his face a battlefield of emotions. Elizabeth's family looked on, a collective intake of breath creating a vacuum of anticipation. "Before you say, 'I do,'" I said, my voice carrying the same calm I'd used in combat medical situations, "there's something you need to understand." The folder was open, the first document clearly visible. Marcus's face went pale. Elizabeth's grip on his hand suddenly felt desperate rather than loving. The secret was about to be revealed, not as a weapon, but as a truth that demanded to be understood. And I was no longer interested in being a passive character in someone else's story. This was my moment of decisive action. Silence descended like a military fog, thick and impenetrable. The wedding guests sat frozen, a living tableau of shock and anticipation. Marcus stood at the altar, his perfectly tailored suit suddenly feeling like a costume, his carefully constructed life threatening to unravel with each passing second. Stepped forward, my prosthetic arm catching the light, a gleaming testament to survival, to adaptation. The documents I'd carried were more than just paper. They were a narrative waiting to be understood, a truth that had been buried beneath years of silence and misunderstanding. Elizabeth's family looked like a collection of porcelain figures, perfectly positioned but suddenly fragile. Her father's hand gripped the edge of his chair, knuckles white. Her mother's carefully applied makeup seemed to crack with the weight of impending revelation. "Before this marriage continues," I said, my voice calm, the same tone I'd used in combat medical tents, in emergency situations where clarity meant survival. "There are truths that need to be understood." Marcus took a step forward, his movement a mixture of desperation and denial. "Mom, don't!" The words hung in the air, incomplete, a plea that carried the weight of years of unspoken history. The Veterans Support Group had prepared me for moments of difficult truth. Dr. Martinez's words echoed in my mind. Revelation is not about destruction. It's about understanding, about breaking cycles of pain. I pulled out the first document, a medical record, precise, detailed, the kind of official documentation that cannot be denied, only understood. The story began with Robert, not as a simple narrative, but as a complex tale of love, service, and sacrifice. A story Marcus had never been allowed to fully comprehend. My mind drifted to the years of silence. The missed birthdays, the holidays spent alone, each moment a brick in the wall of misunderstanding that had grown between us. "You were never just a mistake," I said, looking directly at Marcus. "You were a choice, a deliberate, complicated, beautiful choice." The medical record revealed the circumstances of Marcus's birth. Not a simple story of unexpected pregnancy, but a narrative of love forged in the most challenging of circumstances. Robert and I, two soldiers who had found connection in the midst of chaos. Elizabeth's grip on Marcus's hand had gone slack. Her perfect wedding day was becoming something else entirely, a moment of unexpected truth, of revelation. I thought about the veterans I'd counseled. Sarah's fight against family expectations, Michael's struggle to be recognized beyond his physical injuries. Each story a reminder that family is not about perfection, but about understanding. The documents told a story of medical challenges, of a pregnancy that was both a miracle and a medical complexity, of decisions made under the most extreme circumstances, of love that defied simple categorization. Marcus's face was a battlefield of emotions. Shock, confusion, a dawning understanding that threatened to collapse everything he believed about his origins. "Your father," I said, "was more than just a name on a birth certificate. He was a hero, not just in the military sense, but in the truest sense of the word." The first document was followed by others: letters, medical evaluations, personal correspondence, that painted a picture far more complex than Marcus had ever imagined. Elizabeth's family sat in stunned silence. The perfect wedding had become something else entirely, a moment of unexpected truth, of revelation. I thought about the years of preparation, the careful documentation, the support from the Veterans Network. Each piece had been a step toward this moment of understanding. "You were conceived," I said, my voice carrying through the silent room, "during one of the most challenging missions of our military service, a moment of connection, of survival, of hope." The medical records revealed a story of medical miracles, of a pregnancy that defied expectations, of love that existed in the most challenging of circumstances. Marcus took a step forward, then another. The distance between us, physical and emotional, began to collapse. "Why?" he asked, the word a plea, a demand, a desperate attempt to understand. Thought about the years of silence, the missed connections, the moments lost to misunderstanding. "Because," I said, "some truths are too important to remain hidden." The documents told a story of medical complexity, of love forged in the most challenging circumstances, of a choice made with full understanding of its consequences. Elizabeth stood frozen, her perfect white wedding dress suddenly feeling like a costume, a facade that was crumbling with each revealed truth. Marcus's father, Robert, was more than just a name. He was a complex human being, a soldier, a lover, a hero in the truest sense of the word. The room remained silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not the silence of judgment, but the silence of understanding waiting to be born. My prosthetic arm felt like a medal of honor, each mechanical joint a testament to survival, to adaptation, to the ability to rebuild after destruction. "This," I said, spreading the documents on the altar, "is who you are. Not a mistake, not a secret, but a deliberate, beautiful choice." The wedding had become something else entirely, a moment of revelation, of understanding, of truth breaking through. Years of silence, and I was no longer just a passive character in someone else's story. I was the author of our own narrative. The weeks following the wedding were a landscape of uncharted emotional territory. My small apartment became a sanctuary of reflection, each room a chapter of a story still being written. The Veterans Support Center had taught me that healing is not a linear process. It's a complex terrain of discovery, of understanding. Marcus called 3 weeks after the wedding. Not with anger, not with accusation, but with a vulnerability I had never heard from him before. "Can we talk?" The words were simple, but they carried the weight of decades of unspoken history. We met at a small cafe near the Veterans Memorial, a deliberate choice. The walls were adorned with photographs of soldiers, of moments of connection, of survival. Each image a testament to stories far more complex than simple narratives could capture. Elizabeth was not with him. Her absence spoke volumes. "I've been going through the documents," Marcus said, spreading several photographs across the table. Images of Robert I had never shared before. Moments of humanity amidst the chaos of military service. A man far more complex than the simple narrative Marcus had constructed. My prosthetic arm felt different now. No longer just a mechanical replacement, but a symbol of adaptation, of survival, of the ability to rebuild after destruction. The medical records told a story of extraordinary circumstances. Robert's complex medical history, the challenges of our military service, the decision to bring a life into the world under the most challenging of conditions. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Marcus asked, his voice a mixture of pain and genuine curiosity. I thought about the veterans I'd counseled, Sarah's fight to understand her family history, Michael's struggle to connect with his past. Each story a reminder that truth is not a weapon but a bridge. Protection, I said, is not always about hiding. Sometimes it's about waiting for the right moment of understanding. The photographs revealed a Robert that Marcus had never known. Not just a name on a birth certificate, but a complex human being, a soldier, a lover, a father who had made extraordinary choices in extraordinary circumstances. Marcus's fingers traced the edge of a photograph showing Robert during a particularly challenging mission. The image captured a moment of profound humanity, a soldier helping a local child, a glimpse of compassion amidst chaos. "I never knew," he said quietly. The words were both an observation and an apology. The Veterans Support Network had prepared me for moments of difficult reconciliation. Dr. Martinez's words echoed in my mind. Healing is not about forgetting. It's about understanding. We spent hours talking, not just about Robert, but about the years of misunderstanding, the missed connections, the moments lost to silence and assumption. Elizabeth's absence was a story in itself. The perfect wedding day had become a moment of unexpected revelation, a truth that could not be contained by social expectations or carefully maintained facades. Marcus shared his own journey of processing the information. The medical records, the personal correspondence, the complex narrative of his own origins. "Change is everything," he said. But the words were not spoken with anger, but with a sense of profound discovery. I thought about the documents I'd carefully assembled, not as a weapon, but as a bridge of understanding, a way to connect the fragments of a family history that had been broken for too long. The cafe around us faded into the background. Other patrons became a soft murmur. Our conversation was a world unto itself, a territory of rediscovery, of connection. Marcus pulled out a photograph I had never seen before, a moment from his childhood. Me, holding him, during a rare moment of connection before the distance grew. "I remember this," he said quietly. "I just didn't understand it." The Veterans Support Center had taught me that family is not about perfection. It's about understanding, about breaking cycles of pain and misunderstanding. We talked about Robert, about the circumstances of Marcus's birth, about the complex love that existed in the most challenging of circumstances. My prosthetic arm felt like a living part of the conversation. Each mechanical joint a testament to adaptation, to survival, to the ability to rebuild after destruction. The medical records told a story of medical miracles, of a pregnancy that defied expectations, of love that existed in the most challenging of circumstances. "I want to understand," Marcus said. The words were a bridge, a beginning. The photographs continued to tell their story, moments of connection, of survival, of love that defied simple categorization. As the cafe began to empty, as the day began to fade, something was changing. Not just between Marcus and me, but in situ, the very fabric of our understanding of family, of love, of survival. We were no longer just survivors of our own history. We were authors of a new narrative. 6 months after the wedding day that changed everything, I stood on the stage of the Santa Clara Veterans Community Center. The room was filled with veterans, families, supporters, a collective of survivors, of storytellers, of individuals who understood that truth is the most powerful weapon of healing. My prosthetic arm caught the light as I adjusted the microphone. No longer something to be hidden, but a symbol of resilience, of adaptation, of survival. "Every family has a story," I began, my voice carrying the weight of decades of unspoken truth. But not every family finds the courage to truly hear it. The Veterans Support Network had become more than just a professional community. It was a family, a collective of individuals who understood that healing is not about perfection, but about understanding. Marcus sat in the front row. Not beside Elizabeth. Their relationship was now a complex negotiation of truth and understanding. But he was here, present, listening. The journey had not been simple. The weeks following the wedding had been a landscape of emotional reconstruction. Difficult conversations, painful revelations, moments of profound connection and equally profound misunderstanding. We talk about military service as if it's something that happens over there, I continued. But the truth is, service is a family experience. It touches everyone. It changes everything. Dr. Martinez sat nearby, her eyes reflecting a mixture of professional pride and personal understanding. She had been instrumental in helping Marcus and me navigate the complex terrain of our reconciliation. The medical records I had revealed were more than just documents. They were a narrative of love, forged in the most challenging circumstances, of a pregnancy that was both a medical miracle and a testament to human resilience. Marcus had spent weeks going through the documents, the letters, the medical evaluations, the personal correspondence that painted a picture of his father, Robert, far more complex than he had ever imagined. Your origins are not a mistake, I told the audience. They are a choice, a deliberate, complicated, beautiful choice. The veterans in the room understood. Heads nodded. Tears formed. Each person recognized the complex language of survival, of love that exists beyond simple narratives. Elizabeth had disappeared from Marcus's life shortly after the wedding. The carefully constructed facade of perfection had crumbled under the weight of unexpected truth. But Marcus was learning to find strength in vulnerability, in understanding. Families are not about keeping secrets, I said. They're about creating connections, about understanding the complex stories that make us who we are. My work at the Veterans Support Center had taken on a new dimension, not just counseling, but helping families navigate the complex terrain of military service, of unexpected histories, of love that defies simple categorization. Marcus and I were still writing our story. Some days were easier than others. The years of distance could not be erased with a single conversation. But we were learning, connecting, understanding. Every scar, I told the audience, tells a story. Every prosthetic arm is a testament to survival. Every unexpected moment is an opportunity for connection. The room was silent, not the silence of judgment, but the silence of understanding waiting to be born. My prosthetic arm felt like a living part of the story. Each mechanical joint a testament to adaptation, to survival, to the ability to rebuild after destruction. We are not defined by our wounds, I said. We are defined by how we choose to heal, by how we choose to understand. Marcus caught my eye. A look of connection, of understanding, of a journey still being written. The veterans in the room were not just an audience. They were a collective, a family of survivors, of storytellers, of individuals who understood that truth is the most powerful form of healing. As I concluded my speech, the room erupted in applause, not just for me, but for every veteran, every family, every individual who had found the courage to understand their own complex story. If you've been touched by this story, I said, my final words carrying, through the microphone, if you understand that family is not about perfection, but about connection, then you are not alone. And to you, our listeners, our viewers, this is more than just a story. This is an invitation to understand, to heal, to reconnect. Subscribe to our channel. Share your story. Because every voice matters. Every story deserves to be heard. This is not the end of our journey. This is just the beginning.